and I hope it's not too much of a downer to go out on. But I don't think I'm alone when I say that I find death a really confounding concept. It's the one certainty in life that we're all going to die, but I think we're all pretty ill-equipped to deal with this fact. Nonetheless, I spend a lot of time thinking about it. And my talk today is going to be about how thinking about death has transformed things in my life, and also how it's inspired a art/life project, which is my burial shroud, and I'll talk more about that. A couple of years ago, I was diagnosed with a very early stage breast cancer. It wasn't life-threatening, but it was life-changing, and it gave me a big scare. Like many women my age, I'd gone to the doctor to ask for hormone replacement therapy, but instead I came out with a cancer diagnosis which needed an operation, 4 weeks of radiation, and the kicker was a hormone blocker. And so I really did not want this cancer to return. So as well as the treatment plan, I started thinking about other things in my life that I could change to decrease the cancer coming back. Now it turns out that alcohol, lack of exercise and stress are all contributors that can increase the chance of getting cancer. So I did a lifestyle audit, and at that stage of my life, to give you a picture of where I was at, I'd just been made the CEO of the arts organisation where I work. I was working 70 hours a week, I had no time to exercise, and I dealt with the stress by drinking every day. Now, I knew that these were all things that I needed to change in my life, and I had tried, but it never stuck. Turns out cancer is a great motivator, and I made all those changes. The first thing I did was reduce my working week to a 9-day fortnight. I took up exercise, and I go to the gym every day before work, and I haven't had a drop of alcohol in 2.5 years. Now, I can't emphasise how much these changes have improved my quality of life. I'm happier, I'm calmer, and I'm more focused as a person. And working less has meant things like I can go out on my long weekends, out into nature with my boyfriend, and we go kayaking and hiking, and those times really recharge my batteries. Now, as a side note, the organisation where I work, we decided actually for the whole organisation to reduce our business hours. And at first when we did that, I was worried that all the artists that we work with wouldn't like that because we were not available as much. But we had a really positive response from them all, and actually a lot of them said, oof, we need to rest and work less as well. So that's how the positive things that came out of that for me in terms of how I was living my life. But it also made me contemplate death a lot. Now, this cancer, as I said, was not life-threatening, but it did make me think about the fact that we are all going to die one day. And I started thinking about, concepts around dealing with death and grief, and it took me back to the time when I dealt with my father's death. Now, he died in a tragic sailing accident, and he drowned with my uncle on the boat that they were sailing at the time. And when we were going through the process of organising his funeral, the funeral parlour said to us, can you please bring some clothes down so that we can dress him for the funeral? And we decided to put him back in the clothes that they found him in, minus one shoe which he had lost in the sea. But then my brother said to me, I think we should dress him. Now, this is not something that I would have ever thought of doing, but I was not going to let my brother do it on his own. So that's what we did. We took the sandy clothes down to the funeral parlour, and we spent time with my dad, and we dressed him. Now, we made the rookie mistake of putting on his pants before we secured his belt. And so as I was trying to get his belt on, I skipped all the loops at the back because they were too hard to get to. And my brother told me off. He said, do it properly. And he was absolutely right. It was so important to do that properly. But in that moment, I felt a real connection with my dad, as I had always thought of him as someone who cuts corners. And at that moment, it felt like a similarity. And we'd had a pretty difficult relationship, so it was nice to feel that connection. Now, dressing him was a really difficult thing to do, emotionally and physically. but it was such an important ritual for me to come to terms with the grief and loss. And so as I was going through this process of thinking about death and mortality and living life, I started thinking about my own funeral. And I thought that I would like to be buried in an eco-friendly cardboard box. But then online I came across this woman who had made her own burial shroud. Now, I know lots of cultures use shrouds instead of coffins, but what really appealed to me is that she had made her own. It was the act of making it. And also, I really loved the idea of being buried wrapped up in a piece of art. And so I thought, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make my own burial shroud. And I was really excited by this idea. I started the process by spending some time reflecting on my life, thinking back to all the important milestones and stages from birth through to now. And from that, I sort of mapped out a design using animals and plants and insects as representations of each of those stages. And the next thing I did, one day I was out walking and I came across this man who was putting all these household items onto the nature strip. And amongst it was this beautiful white cotton blanket. And I started chatting with him, and he told me that he was moving back to Egypt to care for his dying parents. And I asked if I could take the blanket, as it was the perfect base for my shroud. I was so excited by this project, and I thought that maybe other people would be interested too. So probably not the phone call they were expecting. What are you doing on the weekend? Do you want to hang out and make a burial shroud? But they were interested, and that's what's happened. A group of us get together every few months, and I guess it's like a combination of a death cafe meets crafternoon. But we come together with a very specific intention of thinking, meditating and talking about death. And so we sit and we stitch and we have conversations about the nature of grief, people that we've lost, what we want for our own funerals and in death. And we do things like put together our end-of-life plans. And it's really special, and I love it. So what's on my shroud? Currently, I'm working on embroidering a huge snake. And when I showed my mum, she was worried that I'd gone all biblical. But for me, a snake represents transformation and healing and facing fear. And then the other day, I was talking to a friend about the nature of grief, and she said when her mum died, grief was like a huge mouth. I think for me, when I was going through the grief of losing my dad, I really felt that it changed the sense of time and space. It felt really big and cosmic. And the only other time I felt anything similar to that is when my daughter was born. And in both those moments, I felt like I was a link in a chain that went back to the beginning of time and leaping into the future. And for me, the snake represents that feeling as well, like a thread going through time and space. I think we all have our stories around loss and grief, and I think they're really important to talk about. And so coming together with this group of friends and spending that time is really profound and special. Making my shroud reminds me that one day I'm going to die, but it also reminds me that in the meantime, I'm going to live life to its fullest. And hopefully it's a project that takes us many, many, many years to complete.